To start off any discussion of free energy, we have to go back to first principles that we have to assume are true because we don't have the perspective necessary to make them true. And so these are certain givens, and there's a certain rationale for having these presumptions in the first place and not excluding them, so I'll try to cover all of that, hopefully, and not forget to. The first premise is God, as being this some kind of supernatural force, supranatural force, or super, that is eternal, immortal, and all-powerful. Okay, so all of that would imply perpetual motion. And being the creator creates his creation, or her creation if you prefer. And if we just took creation by itself to the exclusion of its creator, then we would assume that creation is a closed system and we have to have some weird mechanism that physics came up with called the Big Bang, and everything's going to run down and eventually come to a stop and not restart itself. Well, that's okay if it was a closed system, but creation is not a closed system, it's an open system, and it's being fed perpetually from an infinite source of energy, namely God. So God is perpetual motion. Creation is an open system exhibiting the property of asymmetry, an imbalance. It's constantly out of balance because of the fact that it is being fed by energy perpetually from its creator. So creation does not exist separate from the creator. In fact, in all likelihood, if creation is nothing but a thought in the mind of the creator, if the creator ceased to be, then the thought of the thinker would also cease to be and creation would disappear. So it's illusory to think that this is solid when it's really just a thought in the mind of God. And it's quite a big mind, very vast, and so since we're in the fantasy of God's thinking, by all appearance we're real, because we're within the context of the dream or the fantasy or the thought processes of God. For us to become enlightened is to step out of that process of thinking or dependency on somebody else thinking us into existence, such that we become our own God to ourselves, capable of manifesting our own creation if we wish, but no longer dependent on God in order for our existence to be validated or maintained or whatever you want to call it. So all of this is necessary as a predicate to the topic of free energy. You can't even talk about free energy unless you've got a cosmic vista that you take for granted as a given. Because everything in your observation of natural occurrences does not prove otherwise. And that's not to say that something couldn't come up, but we don't live long enough to find out. That's the problem. And so we have to take it as a given, that by all appearance, there is a God and yada yada, all that stuff I've said. But there are consequences to that line of reasoning. And we don't think about those consequences when we think about creation and the constant turmoil of an argument between the conservative thought that, no, everything's a closed system. Wrong. Everything's an open system because it was fashioned by God to be dependent on Him for its eternal operation. So creation is eternal, so long, and God, because God's eternal. And so creation goes on being a free energy device because it's constantly fed from outside itself, because it's an open system, exhibiting the consequence of that situation being asymmetry, imbalance. So it's constantly using up energy, which means that's an imbalance, but it's being fed energy from the outside. That's also an imbalance. So it's never in a state of balance. And to think that balance is the norm is to forget that creation, is to separate creation from its creator. And to think, operationally think, on the basis of non-reality. Things just don't work that way. But unless they're created by man. Like a car. Do you see a car hooked up to nature? No. A horse, he's hooked up to nature. He's a free energy device. Not perpetual, he's got a lifespan. And you have to maintain him. You have to take some energy to maintain him, take him to the vet and whatnot. And you got to feed him. You got to pay the farmer, so you got to work for the money to pay the farmer to get the hay to feed and the oats to feed your horse. But he's a free energy device because he's hooked up to a source greater than itself. Hay, made from sunshine, you know. And what feeds the sun? God, ultimately. At some point in the cascade of energy, you know, coming from the Creator. Where else does it come from, right? But when we create an automobile, it's not auto. You got to put a battery in. You got to put gasoline in, and then you got to sit there and guide it. It's hardly. Oh God, we really screw ourselves just by how we think. All of that aside, we claim that the automobile is not a free energy device because it's a closed system. We take then we'd be looking at the horse within the span of time between meals. You know? Say, we're going to ignore the fact that we just fed it some hay because we're taking it out for a walk. We're going to ride into town and pick up some groceries, okay? So we're going to ride into town, so it's a closed system, right? Oh, it better be, because I'm not going to give it any food on the way. It'll be pooping on the way, right? So that's not a closed system. Oh, shit. Yeah, shit. Evidence of having eaten. Of course, with a so-called closed system such as an electric car, we don't look at the fact that the battery is wearing down, right? It's running out, I should say. It's running out of it's wearing down too, just by age. But it's running down its charge of energy and creating heat in the process. Instead of the electric motor creating heat, it doesn't. It's the battery pack that heats up when we charge it, and it heats up when we discharge it. It's like all those chemical reactions are creating heat, and we don't bother to go in there with thermometers, so we think, oh, it's a closed system. No, it's not. It's dissipating heat to its environment because it's using up its energy store. You know, so there's no such thing as a closed system. But you can only have same energy in for same energy out in a closed scheme, which does not exist. It's a fabrication of the mind to think of something as a closed system, when in reality there's no such thing as a closed system. So yeah, I run down, and creation runs down. But for the lifespan of my existence, I do eat occasionally. So I don't run down entirely. I just age. But if I slept enough, I would be constantly rejuvenated. And if I maintained the right lifestyle such that I didn't stress myself out to such a degree that 24 hours of sleep would not be enough to maintain my youthful appearance of a 10-year-old, you know, then I age, and I get old, and I die. So there's more to it than just eating to keep the body going. It's how we eat, it's how we live, it's how we think, it's how we act, it's how much do we think we have to action we have to perform in order to achieve our desires. And are we striving for desires greater than what our body can handle without making it impossible to avoid the aging process because we did it to ourselves? You know, aging process is part of the consideration of whether or not this physiology is a perpetual motion machine, capable of living forever. If we stress ourselves out greater than what 24 hours of sleep can repair, then we are going to age. It's a given. But it's a given that we assume without thinking it through. We're told by grandma, oh, you grow during sleep. Get plenty of sleep so you can grow up. Or we tell people who are healing from injury, get plenty of rest. Why? Because then you can spend that energy for healing instead of spending it trying to make a living when your body has already broken down, or your mind, or both. You see? See where we're going? We don't even think this thing through. Free energy is possible, perpetual motion is possible, but there are consequences to the formulation of those thoughts and the execution of those thoughts, more importantly. And if we're not willing to live with the caveat of the consequences of those thoughts and actions, then it's no small wonder. They would say, oh, ridiculous Vinny, what is he? He's just one of those free energy thinkers. Don't listen to him. Well, this is why this video is important, to set up first premise. God is invincibly perpetual, and creation is totally dependent on God's existence for creation to exist at all, much less continue to run and operate, which makes creation an open system, an open-ended system. It also makes it a free energy device because it's getting energy from God, its creator, for free. Oh, the goodness of God's heart, Create this creation and feed it to keep it running. And when creation runs down, it goes to sleep. It's called pralaya. It's a Sanskrit term. It means the night of Brahma, the night of the creator. And so creation goes to sleep for 2.2 quadrillion years. And it wakes up and is active for another 2.2 quadrillion years. Making one day of Brahma 4.4 quadrillion years. Quadrillion, it comes after a trillion, quadrillion. So, we've got creation repairing itself during sleep, in which the stress level of creation rose at the end of its day to the point that it ran down and had to take a rest. Why is that? Probably because Planck's constant suddenly rose, and the minimum quanta of energy required for an action to take place suddenly rose, making it impossible for any action to take place because there's not enough energy in the system to make it possible for a quanta to occur. And so a quanta becomes virtual and is no longer actual during the sleep stage of creation. And so everything exists in a virtual state of non-change, yet it does exist in a virtual sense. It doesn't lose its existence, because if it lost its existence, it would become unmanifest. It would go back to the creator from whence it arose. Creation is manifest and the creator is unmanifest. It's usually another given. So we don't lose creation any more than we would lose a quanta. It just becomes virtual because the quanta has risen to such an extent that the energy of the system is not enough. God's not feeding it enough energy, and so creation has to take a nap. And that's a good thing that the Creator doesn't give us an infinite amount of energy at any one time, but a more or less finite amount of energy, because we would never go to sleep and take rest and repair. So, free energy over time, or infinite energy over time, but in any given time, no, a very finite amount of energy does any system run on, or else you'd burn it up, right? An angelic system, there are 9 orders of angels. In the highest order, the seraphim, they have a nervous system capable of handling huge amounts of energy that would make it uncomfortable for the order of angel beneath it. The cherubim, the 8th order of angel, would find it a little, not too bad, but a little uncomfortable, a little humbling to stand in the presence of a seraphim. But for the order of angel beneath the cherubim, let's say us, we're not even angelic, it would be so humbling we'd fry. Oh, where's Vinny? He's gone. He was there a minute ago, but now there's just an ink spot where he used to be. Because he fried. It became a little glob of tar sitting on the sidewalk. Because he stood in the presence of a cherubim for a little more than a nanosecond, and he got fried into a glob of tar. So, there's a limit to how much energy a system can take before it breaks down completely and just turns to mush. We know that when we put it in the microwave, right? So, or fry it in the frying pan. So, if you supply enough energy in excess of what it can handle at any given moment, the thing turns to mush. It turns to, it's no longer a living system, a system that can operate. So there are limits, and given those limits, stress, which is a form of energy but has no organization to it. It's like it's energy of a non-organized makeup. So it creates breakdown by its very nature. It spreads it like a virus. It spreads its disorganization to infect its host that operates on that energy, because stress is a form of energy, and it breaks down the system that it hosts, and that hosts that stressful energy. And the system runs down and has to take rest. And so while activity is not happening, but is in a state of virtual manifestation, because quanta of energy is greater than the energy supplyable to make that quanta happen in an actual state. So instead, what happens is the energy that would have gone for activity instead can go towards repair. And that's the magic of sleep. That repair happens at all. But that's the magic of sleep. That energy not spent on activity can go instead to take care of repair. So just by the aging process, we know that we are not living our full potential of rest. We're not getting enough rest. Or, if you prefer, we're not getting rest in a format that's intelligent enough to do the repair requisite to maintain the state of the physiology of a youngster for as long as we like. We're not getting enough rest, or of the right quality. We're not getting enough quality of rest, depth of rest. So when we look at energy, we're looking at roughly one side of the equation, namely activity. We forget to look at the state of energy when energy doesn't activate, when it's virtual, not actual. And that's when repair can happen and rejuvenation. Making the physiology, which is just a machine, give it the potential for perpetual existence. So, the argument of perpetual motion is a dumb argument, because once in a while you have to stop motioning in order to maintain perpetuity. So it's episodic, it's periodic. Perpetual motion can only be perpetual if it's periodic, if it takes periodic rest from motion to repair itself, so that it can re-engage itself in a state of activity embodied by a machinery that is somewhat coherent enough to incorporate, exhibit activity, which is the expression of energy set into motion, but you have to have the integrity of this system, of the device, of the machine, intact enough to be able to operate at all. And so periodically you have to refrain from motion. So perpetual motion is a fallacy of logic. It's not a problem of science. It's everything I've been saying is predicated on a logistical thought process in which the first premise, God, has to be invoked. We cannot have science without God. It's impossible, because we wouldn't be able to take rest at night and repair the physiology, and we wouldn't be able to invoke any energy, much less put food in our face and munch on it and swallow and poop, to be able to use that energy to run around and do things and scream, ah! Like on a roller coaster ride. Ah! It's really presumptuous of us to exclude God from science. But then, by doing so, which is a fallacious argument in itself, because you can't get away with it for very long, but because we exonerate ourselves, and hold ourselves blameless by perpetuating such a baseless means of argumentation, by that notion we come up with these silly ideas, free energy doesn't exist, perpetual motion doesn't exist, or same energy in, same energy out, and there's no other way to do it. What? Do you see poop coming out of my mouth? No, it comes out the anus because food goes in my mouth and poop comes out my anus. So long as I'm alive and I periodically put food in my mouth and let poop out the back end, I can be perpetual, so long as I also allow time to sleep and not be perpetually in motion. So, it's so unreasonable. There are cycles to nature. And you take a piece of metal and you keep bending it one way and you bend it back the other way. Eventually it'll break. Why? Because you stressed it at the bending point. Now, if you should stop short of breaking it and give it rest, you know what happens? Scientists have taken this, and looking at a piece of metal subjected to these criteria, and they find that it heals itself when we leave it alone. And it'll be less likely to break when we resume the bending process, because we allowed the metal to heal itself just by leaving it alone. Now, is the piece of metal a living organism? You darn right tootin' it is. Because it's exhibiting the same features that I exhibit when I go to sleep. So you're going to tell me creation is not a living entity? It's doing the same thing I do. Only on such a vast scale that you and I are not around to, I've seen it happen. I'm a witness. I can testify that creation goes to sleep. No, you can't testify. Your lifespan is like zip. We're going to have to take that one on a given too. So there are a few givens. The creation sleeps every 2.2 quadrillion years and wakes up. And that God is perpetual and feeds it continually. But a limited amount of energy so that it can go to sleep and not get burned up and fried. So creation is a limited system. It's not a closed system. It's a limited system for how much energy it can process at any given moment. But it's not a closed system because it has to be open to God's feeding it energy, or else creation would run down. Not merely from wear and tear, but run down from lack of energy. Okay? So, those are the kind of premises we have to operate on. Now, where did the energy of creation go to? Not the stress that built up, which is stress is a form of energy, but the energy that got dissipated, it got fed. So where did it go? Did it go back to God? Well, possibly. Or we might want to take into consideration, what is creation's purpose? To create us, humans, who are the penultimate creature of creation, Despite the fact that we're not as powerful as all the orders of angels, or as the planet Earth is a being too, or the galaxy, we're not that powerful, yet we're the penultimate creature of creation because we're the last leg of the journey of all the lifespans that are possible to have, all the types of lifespans that are possible to have. We're the last type of lifespan possible. Once we graduate from the evolutionary process of being one kind of creature and another kind of creature, an angel or an animal or a planet, eventually we get to become a human. But when we graduate out of being a human, now we get to be God and create our own creation. We're still within the context of our God who created us. But now we get to be a God of our own creation and manifest our own creatures. And creation is a creature. Dependent on us. It's creator. It's an endless cycle. So you could say some of that energy is dissipated by the creation of new creatures who will in turn create their own creations. So you could say some of the loss of energy goes there, or the remainder gets returned to the creator. Whatever doesn't get spent returns to its source. So, if you wanted to do an accountability check, then, that would be kind of an overview of, where does the energy go and, where does it come from? Those are important questions. And those are questions of this thing down here, the heart. If we don't ask those questions, then our heart is not operating. Which is conceivable. Hey, most people on this planet, the heart doesn't operate. For most people on the planet, the root chakra operates, survival, and that's it. And the second chakra, swatisthana, belonging to a group. Those two chakras are the only two chakras in evidence for the most part on this planet at this time. Most people operate out of survival and belonging, and that's it. There are a rare few who are manipulators, who are busy sheep herding the rest of their flock, who are too dumb to notice or care that they're being herded around and manipulated. But that's not spiritual. That's coming from the Manipura, the navel chakra, the stomach chakra. Few indeed less than that are the ones operating out of the heart. Few indeed less than that operate out of the throat, who are concerned about truth. And don't feel very comfortable hanging around non-truth. I toss a lot of movies pretty fast these days as I wake up in my awareness of truth. Because truth is relative, it's a relativistic growth process. I'll watch a movie and get all emotionally excited and be all emotionally wrapped up in the drama, and then watch that same movie a few years later and go, this movie sucks, I can't stand it, she's a bitch, get her out of here. And the whole movie is ignoring that character, and instead focusing all of its attention on somebody else, diverting our attention to somebody else. And I just can't be diverted anymore. I see it for what it is. It's a sham of a movie. It's a fraud because in the sense that it's putting focus on the wrong characters. And it's assuming a premise to ignore. Let's ignore this character over here and instead focus our attention over here. That's what ventriloquists do, or magicians do, is get us to focus our attention elsewhere. Well, that's what science does. Forget about God. Where was I before I got shanghaied by movies? Oh, shoot. I don't want to stop this tape and attach it to the other one, but I guess I would have to re-listen to myself to find out what I was talking about that led to that diversion. Well, I guess I don't know what I was talking about. I guess I will have to stop this video. Okay, I was on another diversion. No wonder I lost track. So that's just the fifth chakra, is truth. And then there's the third eye. When you start to devote yourself to to God and the process of enlightenment, namely your relationship, your rapport, your dialogue, your communion with God. Because if you don't put your attention on, well, how's your relationship doing, then you're not really interested in enlightenment. You're not at all interested. And putting your attention on God, put your attention on your conscience, so that you don't wait around till death happens before you stand in judgment. You are very much aware of judgment happening all the time, 24/7. Because you are so devoted to conscience, which is the voice of God, carried on the wings of angels from God himself, or herself. You're very much aware of conscience's role is to guide us, guide our little feet, So it's not just a still small voice within the heart. That's a beginning. It's to open up the heart chakra. That is the predicate of this video. If you can't accept anything I said starting out on this video, then your heart's not open to it. But if your heart is open to it, then you can follow my line of reasoning for everything else that follows therefrom. And the third eye chakra is taking that dim awareness of God in the heart and fanning it until it becomes a conscious devotion 24/7 to fan that awareness and try to bridge the gap and reduce the margin of difference between God and ourselves. Obviously, this nervous system limits us into how well we can bridge that gap. There's always going to be a gap. This nervous system is going to get in the way. But we are actually endeavoring to reduce the gap down to as little as possible to what the nervous system will allow. And that's the devotion of the third eye chakra, is to do just that. To do everything within our power 24/7 to reduce that margin of error between ourself and God, so that we become a living expression of God 24/7, even when we sleep. Now the crown chakra opening up, now we have full access to doing just that, living God in our life, without even thinking about it, spontaneously, effortlessly, so naturally that we don't even know we're doing it. We'd have to be told that we're doing it by another enlightened individual, coming from within, our own awareness, shown, and coming from that same state of God, to be able to judge, the quality of the message based on its source and the medium through which it travels, namely from God, through God, to God, and no difference among all 3 points. Oh, okay. And then in order to be able to accept that as truth. Otherwise, wait a minute, if it's not coming from God, and if it's not traveling through God, and if it doesn't end up in God, then God being an all-time reality everywhere equally positioned, enlightenment would not be a reality then. See? So it's by that kind of overview of criterial judgment, only by that way would it be possible to even consider oneself to be God at that point. So that finishes the discussion. Now I gotta attach the 2 videos together. Damn it, I can't have instant satisfaction uploading to YouTube. Okay, let's see. I was going to put this under Psychology 101. No, Physics 101. Yeah, I was going to put this under Physics 101. Well, it's time to spiritualize physics. Give me that old-time religion. Yeah.